Well, Coach Turk, we appreciate you doing this. We always start these off by just give us a little bit of history. You were at Colin and then on to being assistant coach at Memphis, and then you wound up at Southern Miss. Talk about that process and how M.K. Turk wound up being the head basketball coach at Southern Miss.
Well, when I graduated from college with my master's, the job at Colin opened, which at the time for me was a dream job. It's where I went to school. It's where I wanted to coach. My wife's family was from Lordstar, just outside of Wesson. And I had 6 great years. Not the most paying years, but great years, simply because we won big. We had the best talent, and when you have the best talent, you're supposed to win. So we won back-to-back state championships and South Division championships 4 or 5 times, and had some really wonderful players. And had an opportunity to go to Memphis, and I vacillated over that for a long time. And to make a long story short, turned the job down 3 times. And Wayne Yates, the head coach, said, "I haven't thought through it. What are your goals? What do you want to do? Where do you want to coach? Blah, blah, blah." So I said, "Well, I do want to be a head coach at a major university." He said, "Well, you got to come with me." So I did. I went to Memphis for 2 years, and we were in the top 20 both years. Memphis is a wonderful basketball town. We were playing in the Mid-South Coliseum at the time, and it was full for every game. And there was a long waiting list. Coach Murphy, Spook Murphy, was the athletic director. He showed me a book about that thick of people waiting to get on, to get season tickets. So that was a good experience. And so when this job came open, I called Coach Dale and told him of my interest, and he expressed an interest and came down for an interview, and evidently it went well. And that's kind of how I got here, and it was a wonderful experience. My 20 years here were 20 of the best years of my life, and I was just so fortunate to hit a time where the program could only go up, and it did, fortunately. Each year we kind of made a little progress. Didn't win as many games some years as we did others, but we were making progress with the schedule, progress in working towards getting into Metro Conference. And once we got in the Metro, as you well know, that was the lick that we had to have to take that next giant step to be mentioned in the same basketball terms of Louisville and Cincinnati and Memphis and Florida State and on and on and on. South Carolina, the league was just wonderful. Wonderful for us. It gave us national exposure. We had never played on television before. And it got to the point where we were almost a regular on TV. And, the highlights of that, I guess, would be winning the NIT back in 1987, going to 2 NCAA tournaments, coaching some outstanding basketball players that that developed into NBA players. And you don't mention NBA players without mentioning Clarence Weatherspoon, who played 13 years in the NBA. And so it was a wonderful experience from my days at Colin all the way up through the time that I resigned in 1996 here at Southern Miss.
Talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced when you first came to Southern Miss in 76, 77. It was a program that really hadn't had a great deal of success in a number of years. What were the biggest challenges when you first took over the job here?
Biggest challenge was recruiting because we hadn't played on TV. We were a lowly independent. We were getting better crowds at our games, but not good. So we really had three challenges, and all those led to recruiting and scheduling. And as I aforementioned, once we got in the metro, those were gone. And it cleared the path for us to get to where we wanted to go.
Well, let me ask it this way. Getting in the metro was, as you said, was a great lick for this university. But at the same time, now you had to be successful in there to keep it sort of building. What was the key once you got into the metro to finally getting to compete with the Louisvilles and the Cincinnatis and the Memphises and the Florida States and people like that?
Well, it's a very good question. And it all comes down to recruiting, because you can't win the Kentucky Derby with a mule. You got to have some thoroughbreds. And so we were able to find and recruit some thoroughbreds. And we did our recruiting from inside out. By that I mean we recruited the state of Mississippi first, and then we would spread from there, but we never spread too far. We'd go into Tennessee, Alabama, Florida. So we tried to stay as close to the university as we could, knowing that those people that we brought in would probably bring others with them. And it got to the point where recruiting, I don't want to say was easy. It's never easy, but we were able to hang in there with the big boys when it came to recruiting. And recruiting is the lifeblood of any program.
Was there one moment that you sort of thought, hey, maybe now we got it heading in the right direction, whether it be signing a player like Joe Dawson or going to the NIT for the first time in 1981 or getting in the metro? Was there one moment that it sort of said, yeah, hey, maybe we've got this heading in the right direction?
I think you hit the nail on the head when we first got invited to the NIT. When I would go around to alumni groups and Eagle Club groups, etc., I would be very careful not to shoot myself. And my comment was, hopefully someday we will be in contention to get in the NIT or the NCAA, and that we can build on that. And once we get there, that we're gonna really see some light. And that's exactly what happened.
You and your staff always seem to be able to look at a kid and sort of project what he would be 2 or 3 years down the road. And you got guys like the Derek Hamiltons and the John Whites and the Randolph Keeses and players like that really blossomed while they were at Southern Miss.
Well, absolutely. During that time, Robert McInnes, Mike Jones, Ralph Moore, and later on Coach John Neal, were on our staff, and they had the ability, hopefully along with myself, hopefully, to look at a player and project what he might do. I remember when we were recruiting Bernard Hazlitt, he was not highly recruited. And after his first year, he had a remarkable year. You know, he had like 29 against Louisville and 20 some odd against Southwestern Louisiana when Darren Chancellor was injured, and saw one of the guys that looked at him and didn't think he could play. And Coach Moore says to him, he's really a good player. And this other assistant says, well, we would recruit him, but we didn't know whether he could dribble well enough or not. And Ralph says, we didn't want him to dribble, we wanted him to shoot. And he could do that. He was an awesome shooter. And I hate to start talking about individuals, because you from there, I mean, you go to how many great players we had.
Talk about, it continued to build. You had some success. You'd made the NIT. You finally win the NIT there. Tremendous run to Madison Square Garden. Talk about that experience. And did that sort of tell people that maybe Southern Miss basketball had started to arrive or had arrived?
Yeah, I think so. What that did is, everybody watched the NIT championship. They don't necessarily watch it getting there, but the championship people are going to watch. And, us playing in the mecca of basketball, Madison Square Garden, and winning and having a huge crowd follow us was another big step, along with getting into the Metro Conference. So that was big. And going to the 2 NCAA tournaments back-to-back was big as well.
Did that run to the NIT championship surprise you? I think we'd gotten beat maybe in the second round of the conference tournament, something like that, but get selected the NIT. It's kind of stacked against Southern Miss. You beat Ole Miss at home, but then have to go to St. Louis and win, then have to go to Vanderbilt to win, just to get to Madison Square Garden. Did it surprise you that the team was able to overcome all that and make that run to the championship?
Yes, to a degree it did. After beating Ole Miss, we had to go to St. Louis, which had a very good team at that time. And we were told, you win that game, you'll get another home game. And so, I told the players, hey, we win this one, we go back home, and then we win that game, we'll go to New York. And after we won the game, overtime, I believe, we were told, no, we're going to have to go to Vanderbilt because they're going to fill it up. I think it holds 15,000 or so. NIT is going to make a lot of money on that game. So they did. They sent us to Vanderbilt, and we had maybe one of our best games ever. There was some critical times in that game that we weren't sure what we needed to do, and we kind of took some wild stabs at chances, and they paid off. And so, it was a good one. It was a good. People from here went to Vanderbilt, and they celebrated with us. C.M. Newton, a good friend of mine, already had his rooms blocked, and at the Marriott Marquis. And after the game, we shook hands and talked a little bit, and he said how good our team played. I said, by the way, CM, reckon I could get your suite in New York. He didn't think that was too funny. But I never will forget Will Perdue, 7'3", and my daughters called him Will Perdunk because he dunked about 5-6 times in that game.
Winning the NIT may still be the greatest accomplishment at Southern Miss. I mean, I remember there at Matt. I mean, we had, I don't know how many people, but there were thousands of Southern Miss people who had come from all over the country to be there to watch the NIT, and even today, almost 25 years later, people still talk about that NIT championship.
Oh, it was a great experience, no question about it. I remember walking into Madison Square Garden for the first time. Randolph Keyes looks around and he said, "Coach, this thing sure will hold a bunch of hay, won't it?" So, we had a tough game against Nebraska. They were very, very good. And then 2 nights later, we played the championship and played LaSalle. And they had A-Train. Lionel Simmons, who actually played several years in the NBA and was a great player, a fine person and a great player. And then they had Legler.
Tim Legler.
Tim, who now you see on ESPN. So, it was quite a happening to win that ball game.
Well, then a few years later, you do something that probably nobody ever thought Southern Miss would do. You make it to the NCAA tournament. You do it back-to-back years. That was that was something. Again, I don't think people thought might ever happen at Southern Miss.
Yeah, that was 2 good years, 2 good plays.
Get in the NCAA tournament back then than maybe it is nowadays.
Oh, much more difficult. We had a very, very good team. We played well that year. Didn't play real good in the tournament, the NCAA tournament, but I remember the one game we played down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Louisville beats us 1 point. In a game that could have gone either way, Russell Johnson took a shot with his foot about an inch on the line, made it, cut it to 1, and had he been back an inch, we would have won the championship. But it was good. It was good. A very good experience. Now as I look back on my career here, all I remember are the good things. And there were some down times, no question. In a 20-year career, there's going to be some down times. But all in all, it was a very, very good experience, one that I cherished and wouldn't take anything for.
So where did your coaching philosophy or your style of play offensively and defensively, where did that come from? Who were some of your influences about the way you coached the team and the way you like to play?
Well, I think I grew up on fast break basketball. Being an old Kentucky boy, we wanted to get up and down the floor and shoot it and, keep the game exciting, which I think we had to do at Southern Miss. We were in the entertainment business and we had to entertain, and we did. I always admired guys like Denny Crum. I mean, when we became friends, that was quite a thrill for me because he's really a great guy, great coach. And of course, you know, it goes back to Joe Hall, Kentucky. I followed Adolph Rupp's teams, but too young to recognize what they were doing. I would say that probably those two guys played a greater influence on my coaching. My high school coach, Tom Adkins, played a role, a similar type role. Alton Ricks, my junior college coach, played a similar type role. So my experience as coming up, getting into coaching was fast break basketball, pressure defense, you know, emphasis on rebounding and taking care of the ball, those things. So it was just a combination of a lot of people having a lot of things to do with what success I enjoyed.
The success that you enjoyed eventually positioned Southern Miss to where when Conference USA was formed, because of the success we'd had in basketball, probably more than anything else, helped sort of drive the Golden Eagles into what became Conference USA in 1996.
Yeah, I think we were always going to be a part of whatever developed. In those days, you still had some big-time programs floating around looking for a place to land. Today, we don't have that. Those programs have landed. So today, we're maybe having to search for some teams that can fill the vast void that we have. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all develops and works out.
Talk about what you remember most about your career at Southern Miss. What's when you sit down and think about your 20 years or so at Southern Miss, what pops into your mind?
Well, much of what we've talked about today, the NIT, the two NCAAs, the good players that we were able to recruit. Like I say, we remember the good things, and the things that were less pleasant just have floated away. They're just not there anymore. So I just recall the good things. And, you know, it's kind of like Coach Dale told me. He said, this is right after I resigned. He said, after you've been out 10 or 12 years, you'll be a much better coach than you are today. And he's right. You know, when I see people, they only recall the things we've talked about. You know, they don't remember when we lost a game to Southwestern Louisiana when Andrew Toney hit one at half court, you know, or we missed a foul shot that cost us a game. I don't even remember those. I don't even think they existed.
We don't want to get into, we don't have enough time to talk about all the great players that you coached, but real quick, Joe Dawson was a guy early on that you guys recruited that really had a great impact on the program.
Oh, huge, huge impact. We had lost, this is just the way recruiting works though. We had lost 3 or 4 players that we thought we might get that year, and we needed a power forward. And I remember sitting in the office with Coach McInnes and Coach Jones, and well, where is one that we can develop? And they said, well, we saw this one kid that plays over at Central High School in Tuscaloosa. Said he's out, he's small for his size. He's small for his position. He says, but he's not bad. So I call up the coach, Roosevelt Sanders, tell him what the situation is. And of course, those days you can't hold tryouts or whatever. He says, well, I have him in PE class, 7th period, and I have some other players in there, and if you come by tomorrow at 2:30, he'll probably be playing in PE class. So 2:30 tomorrow, I show up, and Joe's out there playing, and he is muscular, he's strong, he's strictly an inside player, but he's an athlete. And so they finish, and I explained to him that, well, here's your scholarship, only one he's got. And he turns out to be one of the 2 best players we ever recruited. He said, well, I said, I'd like to go speak with your mother and your coach and just explain the situation. And he says, that's fine. We go to his house. And I say, if Joe will come with us and work hard, I think by his junior year, he'll get to see some action, and senior year, I think he'll be a primetime player for us. And Joe just sitting there listening. So I get through my little talk of kind of softening the blow, and Joe says, if I am good enough, would you let me play earlier? I said, if you're good enough, you can play as a freshman. I'm just trying to tell you how I project you. And he said, well, Mother, this is where I want to go if they won't give me a chance. He got the chance, started every game he was ever in, and was a wonderful player and a straight A student, top drawer all the way. If I had known that Joe Dawson was going to be what he is, we would have been after him hot and heavy from the very start.
Well, another one that doesn't necessarily fall in that same category, but Clarence Weatherspoon was a guy who was kind of an in-between guy size-wise that, not a lot of people, like you would think, were recruiting him, but the Golden Eagles got him, and he is arguably the best player we've ever had.
Oh, yeah. But there's no question Clarence Weatherspoon was going to be a great player wherever he went. I mean, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure he could play. And he was everything we expected and more from day one. And again, like Joe, he was a tremendous student, a tremendous person. I don't ever recall of having to get on Clarence for lack of effort or doing what he's supposed to. I mean, he was just there doing it. That's the kind of player Joe was. Randolph Keys could just shoot the lights out. Casey Fisher could shoot the lights out. Derek Hamilton was a wonderful athlete. Kenny Seiler could, Kenny was just a born leader. And John White knew basketball as well as anybody I've ever been around. And that's just to name a few of the guys that turned out to be every bit as good as I thought they would be.
Last question. About half your life has been spent around Southern Miss, either as the head coach or you've worked with me some on the radio, you've been involved in the Hardwood Club, you stay involved in a lot of things that are going on here. What has Southern Miss meant to you through your 35, 36 years, whatever, that you've been around the place?
Well, it's just a very warm spot in my heart. I mean, I wouldn't think of of living anywhere but here. My girls both live here, their families. This is home, and I absolutely enjoy it. I'm proud of what Southern Miss has accomplished athletically. It's a fine academic institution, and Southern Miss will always be a warm spot in my heart.
Coach, we appreciate everything you've done for Southern Miss, everything you still are doing for Southern Miss, and thanks for the visit today.
My pleasure, John.